Hello.
Hi, Dan.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine. Does everybody else hear us okay? Let's have a look at our little comments. This is pretty cool.
Yeah, I just see the Facebook comment there from Music Expo.
Oh,
We're
right on.
branching out.
Cool.
YouTube and Facebook.
Sorry for all the extra moving around noise here.
Piper, you have a really cool background by you now. What is this studio that you're in? This is amazing.
Yeah, just a little something I threw together. You know. No.
I love it.
This is our studio at the house here. This is me and Catherine's little shared space.
Oh, that's awesome.
We have a little custom API in front of me here that you guys can't see, and then a whole bunch of gear over here, of course. And then lots of like vintage instruments and keyboards and things, and dogs upstairs barking.
The most important part of any studio.
Yeah, totally. Hey, welcome everybody that's here. My name is Piper Payne, and this is Dan Bacigulapi. We both are mastering engineers, and we work at Infrasonic Mastering here in Nashville. And so Dan's in the big mastering room right now with that like badass background there.
I know, right?
Yeah, and I'm here. I'm here at home. But yeah, we are doing this like kind of neat thing that I think is I'm feeling good enough to say it's neat at this point.
Definitely. Is this like, what is this, our third installment now?
This is our third official discussion about no stupid audio questions. And we are here to answer questions about anything related to audio, career. Probably not good idea to ask us music questions because I have terrible taste in music, and I'm not sure about you, Dan, but
I would never pretend to have great taste in music for sure. But but music theory, that might be kind of fun. We think we both have enough of a background in that we could answer some questions.
Yeah, just some general business things too. Like is that Raelyn?
Mm-hmm. She's just walking out.
Get her over.
Oh, I think she's
Ray.
I think. Oh, do you want to come on the live stream, Ray? I'll come on for a little bit. Come on. She's gonna come on.
Okay, you all are getting quite a treat. A woman that we get to see almost every day. Raelyn Janicki, one of the most badass, awesome engineer managers ever. This is Raelyn. She is a mastering engineer at Infrasonic Mastering, and she also manages us. So she is the most perfect cat herder I have ever met.
Oh my God.
Which is good because I have a lot of cats.
So what a great surprise to see Ray. This is awesome. Yay.
I was still doing things, so I was like, I'll pop in for a sec.
Right on. So we're doing this thing. It's meant to be a safe space for folks of every background, everything that has anything to do with audio, to ask questions anonymously, or here to interact with us on the little comments zone, and to just talk about all things audio. And Dan and I think this all kind of came out because we each get asked kind of the same questions over and over again. So we were like, okay, maybe we should like get on and talk about this in a live setting and be able to interact with folks. So here we are. I wonder if we should put Ray in the hot seat and ask her a question.
Oh God.
Did she want to
directly?
Okay.
Let's have her answer one of our questions.
Yeah. You guys, I cannot tell you what a treat it is just to be able to see and hear Raelyn's voice every day. And I'm just so happy that we get to share her with the rest of the world right now.
I just work here.
Let's see. Maybe.
Can I pick? If I'm going to have to do this, do I get to pick?
Sure.
Okay, so there's kind of a list though. It's a little bit
Good
tricky.
gravy. Okay.
Oh, I like this one, Ray. How about this one?
Hold on. Wait. We got to do a thing really quick though. Because we have to kind of prime this because we have to prime your answer for you. Okay, so Dan and we have like 2 rules. The first is that questions that are anonymous remain anonymous. The second is that we can't answer any question with "it depends." So you ask a straight question, you get a straight answer from us. Even if we don't know, then we're gonna go find an expert or find somebody who can answer it for us. But we kind of know some things. I think Dan and I are doing pretty okay. Okay, so Ray, feel free to answer any question you want.
How about I'll read this one out for her.
Okay.
This one came in the mastering section, but I think this would work for anybody working in pro audio. Do you go through a warm-up routine before mastering, like listening to reference tracks, maybe checking some things out first, or do you just jump right in?
This is a really great question. So whoever asked this, thanks for doing that. So I do have a warm-up routine. I have a couple of different records that I'll listen to. And so Dan and I share a room. So I will go in and I'll listen to, there's the record Lush by Snail Mail, which is like one of my favorite records ever. And I use that as like my warm-up. Like the first thing I do when I go in Dan's room is like stream that and listen to it for a bit. Also, Golden Hour, Casey Musgraves is like my go-to for like warming up my ears in that room. But I'll do that. And then like when I was just working on projects, like I listen to everything like clean before I do anything to it. So that's kind of like another part of that. But that's
what do you mean listen to it clean?
Like without any processing.
Gotcha.
No processing. Just so I kind of know what I'm going to do before I start doing it. But I always warm up my ears in Dan's room because, you know, things sound different in different places. So.
Nice.
Snail Mail, best record ever.
Those are really good references, Ray.
I love that.
Yeah. I love that you pick like just a couple things to listen to every day. Cause I think that when we talk about references for mastering or for mixing or whatever, there's kind of 2 schools of thought. And one is you listen to reference material that is like the thing that you're about to work on.
Yeah.
Or also, the other, which I subscribe to personally, because I fought that other category for so many years. And once I started just listening to the same thing pretty much every day, I realized that the music doesn't change, but I change a lot and my ears will change. And so if I can just like acclimate that back, even if it's the same room I work in every day, it's still going to sound different every day because I'm different every day. And that is a metaphor for life.
I like that. And you just said like a good thing too about referencing material that's similar to what you're doing. Like I was just working on a song that I was like, damn, this sounds like Senses Fail. So I was like, I'm going to listen to some Senses Fail and make sure it makes sense.
Totally.
And it sounds bitchin', so I'm here
Your
for
senses did not fail. You probably mastered it very well. Woo. Dan, you got anything to add to that one?
No, that was going to actually just say exactly what she just did. Is I usually start just on the Spotify playlist of whatever genre I'm in. It's country, start with the hot country, whatever. But then there's also, you know, the car is a big thing too, to kind of warm up my ears. I'll play music on my way to work, just stuff that I listen to. And it's not necessarily the same thing every day, but just at a quieter, normal level, just sort of warming my ears up to listen. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I've also found that if I don't take a shower, I don't hear as well. Like for whatever reason, that like hot steamy air, like I need that to open up my head. If I don't, I just it takes me a while to get into it. I don't know.
We're all more distracted when you haven't showered.
That's fair.
Dan.
I was gonna say it's probably a good thing that you have motivation to shower every day for your job.
That's fair.
Oh man. How about let's see. I'm gonna pick one from just from today, actually, because we got a bunch of them that just came in today. All right. I'm going to ask this one to you guys and see what you think. Are some mastering engineers using distortion as a way to make a song louder?
Unintentionally.
So we are all mastering engineers, and we have all worked for a lot of other mastering engineers. And so I feel like we have a pretty good handle, like a pretty good survey on what mastering engineers are generally doing. So
I certainly have not specifically added distortion. I know people do, and I'm not saying it's wrong not to, but I have never used like the Culture Vulture or anything like that to specifically add saturation and distortion. But I am a big proponent of smashing converters with level, as opposed to using software limiters. And I definitely get some crunchy things. And in some genres and sometimes that little extra bit of grit really like gives this track a little bit more impact. And I'm sure I keep it in there intentionally sometimes, in an effort to get it louder. I really love clipping more than any kind of true peak limiting or anything like that. So intentionally, not exactly, but I'm sure that is definitely a trick that gets used unintentionally by me all the time.
Yeah, and the converters that we use in Dan's room, like the Furcell's pretty clean, so even if we slam into it, it's not like adding any crazy like saturated distortion at all. But also, like, I know friends that like master metal and hardcore and they clip the hell out of it. And I'm like, I don't do that just because I'm a very like, I want things to be like more polished than anything else. But like, I don't know. I think it's what you're going for too in the genre.
Yeah. And also, I mean, there are other things that come into play too. I promise we'll answer a lot of like mixing and production questions too, not just mastering. But one of the things that I think of immediately when someone says, well, do you add distortion as a mastering engineer? I'm like, well, what if someone needs to make vinyl masters? Like, what is the point of hitting and clipping distortion when there's probably a ton of distortion to begin with in the mix? And what we don't really realize when you make a vinyl master or a set of files to go onto a lacquer disc, anything that sounds like distortion to us sounds terrible on vinyl. Like,
that's a really
absolutely terrible. Like the stylus can't even really replicate it. And so I always think of like, okay, how can I make this like awesome and vibey, but still be kind of responsible and kind of a nice person to the next person that may have to cut this, or myself or Dan that might have to cut this.
That's a good point though. Yeah, definitely the crunchy stuff, the cutter head will not be a fan of. So that makes a lot of sense. Have you ever used intentional distortion in your mastering, Piper? Like added something that specifically adds grit?
Yeah, once in a while. Like there's a couple moments in the very first Madame Gandhi record that there was just a tiny little bit of excitement that was missing. So I actually like fed a little bit of white noise on a parallel, and that is very, very no, don't do that. But it needed it and it worked. So I wouldn't say it's distortion necessarily, but it definitely altered, like it was a creative alteration of what was there in existence. And I kind of felt like a little bit like a rebel.
That's cool.
It's like as much rebellion as mastering engineers get.
Yeah, I feel that. I was like talking to one of my friends about it, and like he has a podcast and I was on it called Sonic City Council.
Right on.
And I was kind of talking about how mastering is like, we're kind of like the cleanup crew, and we go in, like, we don't go in to add a bunch of like crazy saturation and distortion and stuff. I'm like, I go in like a janitor. So
oh, that makes sense.
I'm just a really fancy janitor.
You are not wrong, Ray. All right. Hey, let's answer some recording or mixing questions, or should we go career? You pick, Ray, what topic we're on next.
Jeez Louise. Let's go career. That sounds like a thing I can talk about.
All right, career.
Perfect.
And y'all, don't forget, you go to tinystereo.com and submit more questions for us. We got a whole bunch right in the middle of our chat last time. We're going to be here till 9.
The comments on YouTube and Facebook as well. So
yeah,
feel free to throw something in there. How about, this is an interesting one. Question is it best to be a freelance audio or sound engineer, or to go to a company that needs an audio or sound engineer? I'm asking because I'm still a college student and I haven't built a clientele. I'm willing to learn to work hard, but I just don't know where to go after college is over.
Man. That's a hard one to say. I think that it's the right thing for the right person. Like in theory, if you go work for a company, like let's just say it's an AV company or something, or it's you go work for a tech company in their music division or something. There are some really incredible things that you get by joining a company like that. Number one is money. You can actually make money being an audio engineer right from the beginning if you go work for a company that has a position to be filled. The downside sometimes for some people is that you don't get to really choose what projects you're working on. You don't get a lot of autonomy about your own schedule, and you have projects that might not feed your soul. And so for me, I just wanted to make records and to be a freelance engineer. I never really had a desire to work for a big company or have a regular paycheck until I became more of an adult. And so now I guess I can kind of see both sides of it. I think that the right answer is whomever is going to pay your rent, whether it's a band that wants to take you on tour right now and you go get a job doing that, or it's a company that wants to hire you for a 9-to-5 job that's going to suck your soul out right now. I think no one would judge you or be upset with you for picking whichever job is going to pay your bills. And I will say one thing that's going to sound like kind of weird, but it's honest. And that is that if you ever have to make that decision, you are so far ahead of the curve from your colleagues and folks that are in the, coming out of college as well. So if you are in that position, pick whichever one gives you more money right now.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And it's also, it just depends on what you enjoy doing. I am just that weird type of nerd that can sit for 18 hours and edit audio and take out pops and clicks. And like, I enjoy that. Not as much as actually being creative and putting my mark on a master. But if it's something you enjoy doing, then absolutely, don't be ashamed of that and take advantage of it. It is hard, though. It is hard to do something that you don't love day in and day out. And so I have just made it a mission to really try and avoid those situations, if at all possible. And remember that there are lots of things, like I'm seeing this comment right now that is exactly right. There's the video game industry is looking for sound engineers. And that's a huge industry. Also, I'm sure the companies that do all of the streaming services now, we were just on something called Clubhouse a minute ago before this. And that was like, and there's got to be jobs there for audio. So definitely be creative in what you're willing to do. And try and figure out what it is that you really love to do, and then figure out what path is going to get you there. And it doesn't mean you have to step onto the ship that is your final ship, right? Maybe there's like 7 little canoes to get you to the big ship, but always be looking for that right path to get you there.
Yeah. And I always said, like, make sure that you never, ever leave one job without basically already starting the next one. Okay. Because nothing in this industry is a sure thing. You have to, no matter what it is you're trying to do, and no matter what background you come from, it is really, really hard. There are a lot of folks that are out there trying to help you and wanting to make sure that you succeed as much as possible, but it's hard for everyone. So just try and, cast a wide net and then reel all the fish in, and then choose what fish you want to use. Ray, what you got? What are you going to add?
I feel like a baby all the time. Like, that's a good place for me to start. Like, I'm only
good thing Infrasonic has childcare.
It's me. I'm HR and the childcare department. But like, I'm only 27, and I feel like I lucked out real hard that I like went to school for audio and then moved to Boston and worked for this company that did a lot of like voiceover work and like ADR stuff. And I was just interning, but just watching how like not fulfilled the engineers there were like on a day-to-day basis, because it was like, it's not their passion. Like, I've always known that music is like the most important part of my life. Like, that's always been the biggest part of it. And I don't know, like, it was really crappy to be like a hopeful kid out of college and be like, oh my God, like, I want to work here. Like, this place is great. The people are awesome. And then like literally watching people be miserable in their job every day. And I'm like, damn, that does not make me excited to do this. So I literally remember like the day that I quit and decided that I was like going to move to Nashville, and then a week after moving here, like met my mentor, and then 2 years later here I am. So I feel like I kind of like lucked out real hard and kind of just moved to Nashville on a whim and was like, well, if it works out, it does, and if it doesn't, then I'm doing this bartending thing and will be able to pay my rent. Yeah. So like, I don't know, and it like it was never appealing to me to do freelance stuff. Like I was always like, I want to work with other people. Like I enjoy being around people and being part of like a collaborative kind of environment. So this is perfect where I'm like, I get to see like you, and I get to see Dan and Pete every day. And like with Dave too, like, I don't know.
Y'all, she's being really modest. She's actually like a pocket badass. So just,
I don't know, man. I don't know. I feel really grateful, but I feel like I'm really crappy at giving advice about this because I'm like, I have no idea how any of this happened, but I'm very grateful for it,
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty common.
Let's ask some more questions. And then if anybody there, I've seen them start to roll in. Dan, you probably noticed I was texting you some of the questions to add to our form here. Or emailing you. So I got a question, and it is. It's in relation to mixing. Okay, so this is one that came in today. I want to try and hit those today if we can. I couldn't find in the internet a clear and accurate answer for what exactly is pre-ringing effect caused by linear equalizers. Where does that reverse like sound come from?
Yeah.
So, you want to start, or you want me to start, or Raelyn, you want to start?
I'm gonna let Dan talk about it and go get a drink.
So this is an interesting one, and I will admit that I am not a physicist and I am not an electrical engineer, so I'm going to do my best with my understanding of how linear phase EQs work. But we should probably get someone who's the real expert. But it is my understanding
we've had a lot of linear phase EQ questions.
We have.
Lately.
I feel like it's a fun buzzword you see on the internet in like mastering forums and mixing forums all the time. But basically, the way an EQ works, especially an analog EQ or the analog modeled ones that are plugins, ones that are not linear phase, there's always going to be a little bit of time delay. And that little tiny bit of time delay at whatever frequencies you're EQing is what allows you to boost or cut those frequencies. And all EQs naturally have what's called post-ringing, which is some sort of delay issue that happens slightly after a large transient sound. That's normally where you hear these problems. So if you have a big snare drum, there's going to be some time delay issues at whatever frequencies you're working at. And with analog EQs, it's almost always a post-time delay. And with that for whatever reason, your ear just is not as able to hear that, and it sounds more natural and it makes more sense to your brain. But what a linear phase EQ does is it looks ahead really far and has a long delay time. That's why linear phase EQs often have really massive delay times as plugins and take a lot of processing. But it looks ahead and it affects the audio looking front to back and back to front. It processes it in both directions. And what that allows it to do is then time align perfectly whatever it's doing EQ wise. So there's no phase distortion when it's adding the frequencies. But because of math that is way too complicated for my brain to understand, it will cause sometimes weird like ducks in the signal right before large transients. And oftentimes you'll hear it as almost like a sucking sound, or like the kick drum like drops a little before it like comes back up. And that's the problem that linear phase EQs have with transient material. For what it's worth, I just have never loved linear phase EQs and I don't use them. I have almost always used just analog EQs or some sort of natural phase EQ. But that's just my preference. And I don't, it was never because of stuff like this. I just never really liked the way they sounded. So that's kind of my thing. But that's the issue, is that it has to do with the way it processes the audio. Front and back transients can do some weird things right before the transients that you will hear in the signal.
They can. For this is funny because Dan and I are exactly the opposite. Like, I love linear phase filters. I think that they're wonderful. The reason that I love them is because I can almost like I feel like I can hear through the couple of unwanted effects of them and then hear what they are doing to like net positive contribution to the audio personally. And I think that it really just comes down to that ringing being an issue with bad filters and not very good plugin design. There are a couple that I think are really stellar. One is the Fab Filter Pro Q. And I do like that one by Plugin Alliance that we use on the remind me, Dan, the actual model of that one that we used it. I think it was PS something.
I don't know. I actually don't use a Plugin Alliance EQ, I don't think. I'll
find out and I'll find out and I'll let the group know. But there's a misunderstanding, I think, about how plugin manufacturers actually make tools. And a lot of them, I'm not going to throw shade too hard, but a lot of them are all about the flashiness of it and the maybe some functionality and not all about the actual sound. And those plugin manufacturers that use the very best filters and that pay attention to what's happening to the actual EQ, those are the ones that I think have the better linear phase EQs. Okay. More questions?
I actually like this one. I haven't even added it to our spreadsheet yet, but I think this is a great question.
Okay.
It is kind of mastering again, though. But I think it's good for producers and engineers who are building tracks as well.
Oh, I love this one.
The question is, do songs with less instrumentation or layering have the ability to get louder in mastering than more complex productions? I have a song with 4 elements, and I can carve out their frequency ranges. Technically, they can get louder and will be perceived louder than a production with, say, 15 instruments covering the whole frequency spectrum. Is that true?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
I wish everyone would have the restraint and the discipline that whomever asked that question has, because that person is my hero. Like, okay, let's go back. Let's go like way back. Okay. We used to have one microphone that everybody stood in a studio and sang around or played around, and that was it. And you moved the yes, I like DMG equilibrium. You moved the person and the instrument further away or closer to the microphone, and that was mixing. Like, that is like the ultimate goal again. So when we started adding the, multiple microphones into stereo, and then our ability to do multi-track recording, and then our ability to do multi-track mixing with faders, thank you, Tom Dowd, on a console, we started to get really, really complex inputs into a very, very simple system that has a finite output. And even though in analog world, we can still push more level, more voltage through, through a physical thing, and you might be able to eke out a little bit more loudness. In the digital world, 0 is the top. There is no more computational value after 0 dB full scale. That's it. And so what this question is asking is a more simple and fewer instruments thing. Does that have the ability to become louder? And the answer is absolutely yes. The reason is because when we have a finite ceiling, essentially, for what it's called headroom, basically in a digital system, you have 24-bit, you have 144 dB of available dynamic range. Your noise floor is going to account for some of that. And then you have this little zone in here that is usually quite a lot of space for people to mix sounds in, but for the most part, everybody just uses that last like few dB, unfortunately. And so if you're only going to use that last few dB, do you want to take a school bus and put like an entire zoo with like giraffes and aardvarks and penguins and stack them all in all the seats and then expect someone to like drive that bus down a highway? Or do you want to have like 4 well-behaved children that are all just like hanging out in their own little zones, and that bus is just going to drive down the highway?
I'd rather have animals than children.
Not helpful.
Sorry. Oh God. No, that's totally fair. And like what you're saying too about headroom, I feel like a lot of kids like coming out of college and that are like, you know, younger and don't know how to use VU meters and they only know how to use digital metering. They don't understand the difference between like RMS readings and
loudness,
stuff like that, and how they're like, oh, well, my RMS, like it's reading, you know, -5 or whatever. And it's like, yeah, but how much low frequency content is in there? It's like, it could be reading way higher than it actually is because of what your content is.
I had a mentor early on who has now gone on to win so many effing Grammys. And so I feel really grateful for having heard him say the following: everything under 200 hertz takes up like 75% of your loudness.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I didn't really understand that until I really started mastering records full time for a living and realized that like, that's the key. Like that's the difficult restraint thing that everybody wants to throw a ton of shit into the mix. And everybody wants to have like, you know, the guitarist wants more me, the bassist wants more me, the drummer wants more me, the vocalist wants more me. Oh, and we like definitely can't forget all these reverbs that we made. Like those have to be in there, right? And what we forget is that there's a finite level that you hit. And so if you have fewer things that you're trying to fill up that finite level with, it will easily be sound and feel louder.
Can I say a thing? Okay.
Sure.
Sorry. So once again, people that are younger, kids coming out of college, like you're in college and you get shamed if you don't know, like, oh, like you don't use like parallel compression. And it's like, no, because I don't need to. Like,
yeah,
there's just this stigma that if you're not using a bunch of shit on your chain that like you don't know what you're doing. And it's like, I never use like multi-band compression and mastering. Like, does that mean I don't know how to use it? No, I just don't use it because I don't need to use it. Like, I'm not going to use it for the sake of doing that. And like, I feel like there's so much pressure to be like, oh, I have like this happening, or I'm using like a 1073 or whatever. Like if you're mixing, and like, that's awesome if you know how to do that, but like do it because you need to do it, not because it shows that you know what you're doing. Like that's stupid.
There's this rule in every production, and we always have people that ask us like, hey, should we put something on the master bus, or should we take this thing off or whatever? And it's an easy test. Can you tell me why you're using it?
Yeah.
Why are you using it? If you can say, I don't care what the answer is, I don't have to agree with you. I might agree with you, but if you can just say why, then we can all skip the BS and get straight to getting the project done in the way that like the artist needs it to be done, and it needs to be released out into the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was like how I learned mastering. Was like my mentor, Tommy Wiggins, would always be like, do stuff. And I'd be like, okay, I'll do stuff. And then he'd be like, why did you do that? And I'd be like, I don't know. And then you have to like, you said to do stuff.
Question.
But then, you know, that's like how you learn, is being like having to vocalize what your like thought process is. And now I'm like, okay, cool. This is why I did this.
Yeah, totally.
Just the only thing I want to add really quickly to this question about the levels of thinner or of less dense tracks getting louder too is it's a good lesson on why you shouldn't master for targets as far as like RMS levels. If you're doing a rock record and then you have one song that's an acoustic guitar and a vocal, If you try to put that at the same RMS level as, say, a giant full band thing, it's going to be ripping loud compared to it, because that guitar vocal is going to be able to get a lot louder. And when it's at -6 RMS, it's really loud compared, like especially the vocal compared to the full band with everything at full bandwidth. So it's a good lesson too on just like, yes, those tracks can get loud, the thinner ones, but be sure that you're not making them louder than everything else, so they make the big tracks feel small.
Yes, right on.
Be intentional. That's what I have to say.
I think that that's just like a good rule for life.
I completely agree.
In general. All right. Any questions from the peanut gallery? Should we open this up to some comments? Anybody that wants to ask questions directly to the chat for the group, if you're brave enough, we promise we are very, very nice and answer the questions in a very safe way. So if anybody wants to throw a question out now just for the group, go ahead and do that. Otherwise, I'm going to ask Dan a question.
Uh-oh.
Ha 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 ha. Yeah, it's going to be a good one. All right. Dan.
Yes.
I always felt like phasing issues have been beyond my understanding, and that I never knew how to identify it. What are common sources of phasing issues? More importantly, what do phasing issues sound like?
So this could mean a couple of different things. If this is mastering, or what category was this under?
It's under mixing.
Okay, it's under mixing. So I really wish we had an example that we could like play. But basically, anytime you have where phasing comes into play is when you have either two microphones picking up one sound source or one sound source coming out of two speakers. Phasing is going to happen when there is a disagreement about what time that audio either comes out of those speakers or hits those microphones. And or in mixing, you could use like, say, a delay. If you had two guitars and you delayed one of them, you might have some weird phasing things. But the way this disagreement happens is that because sound is a pressure wave that is an oscillating back and forth, sometimes a pressure wave is going to hit your ear in one direction. Let's say microphone 1 says the sound is going this way because the sound goes back and forth. And then microphone 2 says, no, it's actually going this way. And they disagree with each other. And it's really confusing because the air pressure is going to physically change and sound not like the sound that actually was being created by the instrument. And so what this sounds like normally is I always describe it as being hollow. So it's almost like, yes, I can hear, like, let's say it's an acoustic guitar. You've all sat and heard an acoustic guitar being played with just in a room. It's almost like you can hear that acoustic guitar twice a little bit, or like there's like a hole in the sound of the acoustic guitar. Maybe you can hear the picking and you can hear some of the low frequencies, but overall it doesn't sound full and nice.
All right. I have an example. I have a memory example. You ready?
Perfect.
All right. Who here is a millennial? Okay. Who here watched Nickelodeon? Legends of the Hidden Temple.
Hell yeah.
Legends of the Hidden Temple.
All right.
Omen,
I was into
right?
the Silver Monkeys. All right. So do you remember when they would pan backwards into the audience and like to turn onto the audience, the camera? And just for a split second, you would hear actually what I now understand to have been two different feeds of audio. One from the whatever was on the stage and one from the audience mics. And those things would get blended in together. And so what you have is the same source coming from two different timings. And that's it's called comb filtering. But that sound is the sound that I always think of immediately when I hear phasing issues.
Definitely.
That's like the clue. So if y'all know what that feels like, if you ever watched a game show and they turned around to like pan to the audience, like right at the very end, right before they roll the credits, that's the sound that we're talking about. And
if you ever want to hear the most extreme example of it, if you have a speaker setup in your house, what you can do, one that has an amplifier, you can take the two cables that are being plugged from your amplifier into your speaker and reverse one of them. On one speaker, reverse them. So you're going to have two speakers. In this case, what we'd say is they're not just out of phase, but they're out of polarity, meaning literally every time one goes out, every time one speaker cone goes out to make sound, the other speaker cone is going to be coming in. And sit in front of that and listen to that sound. That is something that is 100% out of polarity, and that's going to feel very strange to your head. Like it's going to have a physical sensation happening.
Turn your head a little bit. Like
you're gonna want to turn your head. Yeah. I've always said it felt like the sound was coming out of my ears more than it was going in. That's like what I perceive, but that will give you an extreme example. And then kind of walk around and like listen to the different ways it sounds in your room. That's gonna kind of give you an idea of sort of what to listen to with phase issues. It's not going to be quite as extreme if you're mixing something, but it's a good kind of experiment, and it's a lot of fun. Like
it makes you feel seasick when you listen to it.
Yeah, it's really wild.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it. But there's so much of what we do is like there's subtle phasing issues, right? And so it's hard to call out and go like that's wrong. But that's why our consoles have they have full and left and right polarity reverse right on the console itself.
Exactly.
Yep.
So that we can test like, okay, does this sound better? Does that sound better? Does that sound better? The same way any of you might have a phase reverse or polarity reverse button on your console or on your interface gear. The same idea. It's just meaning that instead of it being a push and a pull, being a compression and a rarefaction, now it's a pull and a push, compression or rarefaction and compression to complete that period of that harmonic modulation. All right, what should we go to next? Someone asked a question. How do you feel about mixing to mastering? Mastering.
How do I feel about what?
Mixing to mastering.
That's I'm sorry.
Mixing
Isaac
to
says,
mastering?
So I'm guessing you mean like starting as a mixing engineer and then becoming a mastering engineer?
Yeah. I think that's the smartest way to go, really. I mean, Dan, I don't know about you, Dan, but I feel like the path that I took was kind of a very, very steep learning curve. It might have been a little bit easier to master records if I had spent a lot more time mixing in records and being on the beginning of the process.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I pretty much only mixed in college and tracked in college, and then interned at a mastering studio and kind of fell in love with the whole thing. But what I will say is, because I actually worked in a mastering studio for 6.5 years and then assisted a mix engineer for 4 years. And that transition was really cool because what it did let me do was answer and this was a very big established mixing engineer, but it let me answer a lot of questions that he had that, sort of the dark art of mastering secrets that were still in existence in 2008. And so I was able to actually help him deliver better mixes for mastering just because I knew what the mastering engineer was going to want. And then having listened to like thousands of records for 6.5 years made me a lot better at hearing things with the mix assisting too, and kind of understanding what was good and what was bad. So overall, I actually really like the way that I did it. But yes, being thrown into the fire right out of college was terrifying. And I also wish I would have had a little more time to do some mixing and tracking first.
Right. I agree. I feel like that first 5 or 6 years of my career was as difficult as it possibly could be.
Yeah.
And also, it would have been nice to have a little bit more, a little bit more like relaxation, but at the same time, like it builds our character, right?
Well, yeah. Also, Isaac has clarified his question, and not to out anyone, but unfortunately we have names on the comments.
Oh yeah,
I
said be brave. I said be brave. No, everybody can see that. Everybody can see that Isaac asked that.
And this actually parallels the exact question that we also got separately, that I was just kind of saving. But he was talking about mixing like through a mastering chain. Should we mix to master, like as if we are mastering while we're mixing? What do you feel about that?
We went all existential on him. Sorry, bud.
But what do you think about that, Piper?
Well, taking stems and mixing straight into a mastering chain is basically mastering stems. So let's go back like a couple of levels here and talk about what stems are. So stems, I know you're talking about me. Stems are stems are basically meant to be the sum of the mix. And so the way that they're built out, for anybody that has never dealt with stems before, it's a group of instruments or functions of the song, the mix, that when you add those functions up becomes the mix. The mix is the sum of the stems. So it might be like the drums or the drums and bass, and then the lead vocal, and then backup vocal, and then maybe the reverb effects and things. So it gives us a little bit more ability to raise or lower the lead vocal, for instance, if we get a mix that maybe the original stereo mix, the vocal was buried. And so that gives us a little bit more room to work. Or maybe the original mix, the reverbs were too loud. And so this gives us the ability to kind of kick them down a little bit, then put them through our processing. And then it ends up being what the artist actually intended, or the mixing engineer intended. Now, there's a couple things that happen with stems. And I am of the school that when I open up a session with your stems in it, I'm basically finishing your mix for you. And I know that sounds harsh, but really it's meant from a place of love and respect for your mix. I'm not the mixing engineer. You're the mixing engineer. Your mix is only good when you mix it and you finish it. Anything that I do to it becomes no longer your mix. It's like your mix through my lens, and then maybe my master. So in regards to like whether we should master records from stems or not, there's a lot of things that come into that. There's time, budget, and then it really comes down to what the artist wants for the project. And so there are situations that happen where we run out of time. And so then we have to just get stems to be able to make instrumentals, for instance, make alternate mixes that the mixing engineer just can't handle. Or maybe they ran this project as far as they could and they're just not getting what they want. And so they think that last ditch effort, Hail Mary, have the mastering engineer master from stems. Or there's like some sort of weird, like, set of files that have to be sent off for licensing or something, and the mixing engineer just can't make them for you. Like, there's all these reasons that we have stems to master from, but most of those are just sort of technical or like circumstantial situations. I never want to start by mastering from stems, because then it's no longer your mix. Now, taking stems and mixing straight into the mastering chain is literally just mastering from stems. And so you're taking a set of stems, a set of basically the song building blocks, and you are putting them through some maybe analog or digital processing that is considered a mastering chain, and then you're putting them out in the world. That's totally fine. I'm fine with that. So there's a very long answer to like one really simple question.
Well, and that does, I assume that comes from a place of mastering your own mixes, which I would always say, I would always recommend having someone else master your mixes, even if, me personally too, as someone who has been mastering records for 13 years now, I would never want to master my own mixes if I was mixing. And I understand that's not possible for everyone. But I would, there are so many great mastering engineers out there now. And it is becoming easier and easier to do it more cheaply. And so even just having a separate set of ears a lot of times is so helpful that I would always recommend at least trying to do that option. If not, the other thing about putting your mixes through a mastering chain, and this gets into something a little different, but let's say you're working on a project and you want to, you are going to have someone else master it, but you want to send some louder versions to your clients for approvals. I would recommend always sending those versions to your mastering engineer, because a lot of times if you're doing a lot of processing on your mix to get it loud, and then you just take all of that processing off and send it to your mastering engineer, they're going to have no idea what the client was listening to or what was approved, and will not have any gauge of what you were doing to actually get that track loud and get it approved. So I would always recommend sending that version as well if you do that.
Cool. Thanks, Dan. Santiago asks, could you guys share your impressions using Trinov?
It's so important.
So awesome.
So important.
You guys don't know this, but Santiago was actually one of my old interns, and he's killing it down in South America, and I adore him. And it's really cool.
That's awesome. Hey, Santiago, how are you?
Trinov is super cool if you can get into it the way that Pete, our fearless leader, has gotten into it, because it's a super powerful system that really needs to kind of have room to run. So it really needs to be customized properly.
It is really nice, though. I have used it now for 5 years, and it is the only reason I can work in the room that I'm working in, to be quite honest. I don't think there's any amount of room correction as far as just bass trapping or diffusion or whatnot that I could do to that room to make it as usable as the Trinov is. It's unbelievable as a system. That being said, it is important to kind of really understand it and read the manual, and probably call the guys in France, because the manual is confusing as hell. And really try to dig into like what it's doing and make sure it's doing something right for you. But it is a fantastic system. It is quite expensive, is the one downside of it, but I was able to find one used, and I would recommend trying that if possible, if the price point is a little high for you.
Yeah, and I know that like there are different programs, like SonarWorks is a little bit more affordable. And I think that their newer version, you can run all of your audio like through your computer and not like through it, and not just have it as like a plugin on your computer or whatever. So that's pretty rad. But I feel like it's just, knowing how to use it as a tool.
Oh, I should give it like the 30-second, just for people who don't know what the Trinov is. It's a box that is used in your monitoring section and in your room. And basically what it does is you use a microphone, this really cool like 4 capsule microphone that will read the room. You shoot a bunch of pink noise through it, and it reads the room, and then this digital box will take the room and correct using not just EQ but also phase alignment and all kinds of crazy stuff to give you a better, more accurate sonic image. And it's in between your monitoring and your speakers, and that's how it works.
SonarWorks is probably the better entry-level version. Trinov is pretty 200 level classes or higher. Okay. I have another question here. And it looks like okay, your thoughts on miking a B3 Leslie setup? I have thoughts.
I have an opinion, but I'll let you take this one if you want.
All right, I have a fun opinion. Thanks, Rich K, for the question. So everybody understands what a Leslie is and how it works. So maybe some folks don't. So I'll just sort of explain that. A Leslie cabinet is a complement to an organ. Probably the best known one is the B3, but that's just because it was super portable. There are also some other ones that are totally kick-ass, like the 31H cabinet, and those were not portable at all. They're very, very big. But the coolest thing about a Leslie is that it's a spinning speaker. So it has 2 horns that kind of face away from each other, and it's on a motor, and so it spins like this. And so
like a helicopter.
Like a helicopter. And so you can speed that up or slow it down depending on how you're controlling the speaker or the organ. But most of them either have low or medium or high. Like they didn't have like a totally variable speed. So you kind of have to, there was also like a lot of BPM is based around the speed that was available to that speaker itself. One of the coolest ways that I learned to mic a Leslie cabinet was actually to take a pair of SF24s. So 4 ribbon sides technically, and put them at 45-degree angles to each other. So you're actually getting 4 channels of ribbon audio, stereo ribbon audio, but then you're also getting the phase invert and the back side, the front lobe and the back lobe of each of those sets. So that's my favorite way to mic is stereo ribbons, or
That's cool.
other way is is Blumline. I think Blumline is a pretty safe bet for pretty much anything dealing with stereo. One of the important things to know about Leslie is that it's, like I said, it's a spinning speaker, so it kind of goes whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah, and I've seen an engineer in town who does just any dynamic or ribbon, like you're saying, in stereo, but then also throwing an RE20 at the bottom of the cabinet to pick up the low frequencies, which is really cool. And then another cool trick for mixing it, and I picked this up from the guy I used to assist, was the super free Pro Tools Lo-Fi plugin.
Oh yeah,
it's basically like a bit crusher kind of like distortion plugin. Throw that on there and give it just a little bit of grit, and it really makes the Leslie just pop out of a mix. Really awesome. So, well,
hi, Catherine.
I've just been delivered.
Can I get that Postmate down
yeah,
here to the studio?
Dan and I are hungry too.
What is that?
I don't know. Chili.
Chili?
Like homemade pickled carrots.
Oh, I thought you said chili, and I got excited.
It is chili. It's chili.
That's an interesting question, Rich. Rich has a large diaphragm mic. Yeah, I mean, I suppose so. I don't know how that would sound, to be honest. I would say I'd say a dynamic, only because
probably an SM7 or an RE20 would be better, because there's those cabinets make a lot of noise too.
They're so loud.
They do.
But I think it's also important that there are the rotating Leslies, but they also made ones that are just like stereo amps. So not all of them are rotating. So that's also an important thing to know, because I had one in my apartment that I had got from one of my friends, and I was like,
this wasn't broken?
Not rotating.
Oh, interesting.
You sure the motor just didn't work?
I don't know, dude. Maybe I used it as a bar because it didn't work. So like, whatever. Everything's fine. But they do make ones that are just like stereo amps instead of the rotating as well.
I have to tell you guys a really this is like a super duper secret that nobody really knows, but I'm going to tell the internet right now. Okay. When I was 6 years old, I went to sleepaway horse camp and equestrian camp.
Awesome.
And my grandma died while I was gone.
Awesome.
No, it's okay. Grandma Shirley she was sick for a really long time. She was in a better place. But when my little sister and I would go visit her, we would play her organ. It was a Hammond with Leslie. And we would go and play, and my little sister would play the keys and I would play the foot pedals. Like we were so small, like we couldn't reach the pedals. And so she knew that we loved this. And so when she died, she gave my parents this organ. And so I went away to sleepaway camp for a week, and I came back, and there's this organ that's
awesome.
Was just there. Well, here's the problem. I had a very overactive imagination. I imagined that skeletons and ghosts were playing the organ in the middle of the night, and I didn't sleep for like 3 weeks.
Oh no!
Yeah. So then my parents gave the organ away to a local church.
Oh no! Oh.
And now I'm like, what the fuck, you idiot? That was a badass organ.
Real Hammond.
That was like thousands and thousands of dollars for an
thousands
instrument.
of pounds, probably.
Yes.
Jesus.
Those things are heavy as hell.
All right. So anyway.
Oh, that is funny though.
One of my biggest regrets. I'm sorry, Grandma Shirley.
I'm glad that there weren't skeletons in your house though.
There were, but they weren't playing the organ anymore.
Sad.
All right. Let's do like one more quick question. I have an idea for which one this is going to be. And we're all going to answer it. And then we're going to wrap this bugger up. And then we're going to go join the Discord server. Okay.
All right.
All right. Here you go. Has a song ever blown you out of the water with how orally pleasing it is? Oh, AU.
Oh God.
Orally pleasing it is. If so, what was the song and what elements do you think made it so pleasing?
Is this like ever or like recently? Can we set some parameters here?
I'm going to say ever.
Oh God.
Ever. Okay, I got to think about this for a second. But if someone knows, have at it.
All right. And I want everybody in this little comments zone to answer this question for us too. Okay. So what the song is, artist, and then quick reason why it was so orally AU Orally pleasing. I'm just reading the question, Raelyn.
I just don't like the words.
All right. I'll go real quick.
Yeah.
I love the sound of this one record that was mixed by a guy named Ronald Prent, really, really famous, wonderful surround mixing engineer. He and his wife, Darcy Proper, who is one of my very favorite mastering engineers. They have a studio up in New York called Valhalla. He mixed a song called So Glad You Made It. I think it was the exact name of the song. And there's a moment where it all like swims around and surround and then all comes down and like just joins you right in the middle of your head. And it's the weirdest feeling and the coolest thing. And I found it orally pleasing.
Amazing.
That's awesome.
Are you still thinking?
No, I've got a couple, but are you still thinking?
You go, girl.
I've got two that stand out, and one I did have to Google the exact name of the record, the album, because I wanted to get it right. But there's a Frank Sinatra LP that was one of his later records called Old Blue Eyes Is Back, and there's a recording of Send in the Clowns on that makes me cry every time I hear it.
Oh, well,
and
in a good way, like crying a good way.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
The record sounds amazing, but there's something about this still feeling like we're in a room, like making music together. Everything just hits just right. And his vocal is just astounding on that. And I also really like an artist. He's a singer-songwriter from, I guess this probably came out in the 70s, but his name's Michael, maybe the 80s. His name's Michael Johnson. And he has this song called Old Folks. And I can't remember what the album's called. But it to me is also a perfect recording. His vocal sounds unbelievable on it. And I cry every time I hear that too. What's the record? I'm going to kill myself for not remembering it, but that's okay. It's I shouldn't say that. That's terrible. But it's a really good song. Look up. I don't know if you can find it anywhere because it's really hard to find, but Michael Johnson, Old Folks, is a fantastic sounding record. And pretty much anything that Steely Dan does is just, it sounds amazing.
Steely Dan.
Like, it just really does. Like,
Steely Dan.
I have to say, I know it gets like some, people say whatever they want about Steely Dan.
Those people are wrong.
They sound amazing. Asia is an amazing sounding record. Yep.
Ray, what you got?
Okay, so I have two things also. Okay, so first thing is also kind of tied to nostalgia, so I will just preface it with that. But the first ever recording summit that I went to at Welcome to 1979, like when I first moved here, like that first summer, they had Ken Calais come and they played Rumors by Fleetwood Mac on vinyl with him in the room, which is my favorite record of all time.
Amazing.
And they played, through the entire record or whatever. And I literally remember they had all the lights down, but they had like string lights happening. Also, SZA's record Garden rules. Hell yeah.
That's from the comments.
But anyway, sorry. Yeah, total tangent. But I remember sitting in that room and they had all the Christmas lights and I was closing my eyes and there was this girl next to me that I had never talked to in my life, but like she started crying and then like looked at me and then Songbird was playing and then I started crying and I was like, this record is just beautifully done. And like the guy who engineered it is sitting 20 feet in front of me. Like that's nuts. So that was like a whole, experience. But most recently, Hayley Williams' new record, Flowers for Vases. I was listening to that in the car the other day and Heba mastered that because Heba's a badass. That first song, First Thing to Go on that record, I literally like broke down crying in my car. And I was like, this is just beautiful. Like the way that she mastered it, because I like listen to things now and I'm like, oh, what did the mastering engineer do? But like the way that she mastered it, it's just like, there's so much clarity and there's space for things to hang. And it's like just her and her acoustic guitar. And like Dan said, like you feel like you're right there in front of her. And I don't know, back to intentionality. Like, I just think that is so astounding in music now because people just, make a lot of stuff that is for the sake of making it and not because it's like what they need to make,
Yeah. Wow.
Feelings.
I wish there was more feelings. More feelings needed, please. Jeez. All right. Hey, y'all. So I think we're going to wrap this one up. Ray, thank you so much for joining us and like just coming to hang out with us here for a little bit.
It was my pleasure. I'm glad I was still doing things and could do this.
Our jobs seem to never end at this point. It was really nice to have you here and have your perspective on things. Dan, my esteemed colleague and co-host, thank you very much for being here. Loic,
always.
Loic and Carmen, thank you so much for running this thing. Loic from Music Expo, thank you for always having my back and taking my crazy weird ideas for all of this stuff. We are doing this every first Thursday of the month at this time, which would be 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. And we are going to have a special guest next time, hopefully talking about gear and manufacturing and tubes and transistors and voltages and real electronics and things. So bring your questions about gear and anything related to audio and audio manufacturing and actual real physical hardware for us for next time. And I'm really, 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 really grateful to be here. And thank you all for taking time out of your evenings to hang out with us. I'm going to guess maybe we'll do like one of those little Clubhouse pre-shows next time. You cool with that, Dan?
Yeah, that was actually really fun.
Yeah. So yeah, we did the Clubhouse thing for about half an hour before this little shindig started. So just keep an eye on the website, and the calendar and send your questions in, via tinystereo.com.
Woo!
Yay. All right.
Well,
anything else? I don't know. Loic usually comes on and says hello and says something. So I guess we'll have to. There he is!
Oh, he's muted though.
Loic, we have a stupid audio question for you.
How to unmute my mic?
Are you ready, Loic? You're gonna have to answer this one.
I try.
Do you hard pan your hi-hats?
Sometimes. But actually, no, I put it like here.
A little bit? Just a little bit panned?
A little bit, yes.
Okay.
Unless
perfect.
if I have two hi-hats.
Okay. So we have a Discord thing happening next.
Is that it? Is that? Did you judge me right now or not?
No, there's no judgment.
Loic signed on for the verbal abuse.
I thought the questions
after.
were anonymous. The answers are not.
The answers are not anonymous. Thank you, Carmen, for running the backside of this. Thank you, Loic, for having us as always. And there's lots of other things happening during the month for Music Expo. Did you want to say anything about that stuff, Loic?
I mean, next week we have we come back with Frank Sokor will come back for the Mix Critics session, and his guest will be Gary Noble. Gary is famously known for working on a few albums, such as the Amy Winehouse Back to Black, or recently Jasmine Sullivan, or a few years ago on Estelle. So it's going to be an amazing session, and I hope we're going to submit, you guys are going to submit a lot of tracks. And last thing is actually we're going to give away some plugins. So make sure you go register and submit the track. And now I think we should all go to the Discord and hang out.
Right on. Let's do it.
Let's go.
All right. There's a link to the Discord somewhere? Yeah? It's easy to find? Okay.
Yes, and it was an invitation. If you receive the confirmation email, there will be a link there.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Loic. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Ray. Thanks all the people here tuning in. Y'all are awesome.
This was fantastic. We will see you all next month.
Yeah.
Yeah. See you at Discord. Bye.